All right, thanks for joining us today for this quick look at Telekinesis. We are going to break down what this power does, the changes for the 2023 update, which goes into effect with the Spider-Man Beyond Amazing set, and we're actually going to take a look at a few examples of how this works in practice. So make sure you stick around to the end and check out those examples. It should give you a good idea of how to use this in gameplay. Let's get right to it. So telekinesis states that it is a power action, a minimum range 4. Choose a terrain marker or single-based friendly character within range and line of fire. Place it into a square within range and line of fire that is also within range or within 4 squares and line of fire from that terrain marker or character. Also, this character can make range terrain actions as if it was holding terrain markers within a range and line of fire. Now that's a lot of stuff to get through, and that's why it's sometimes confusing for newer players how this power works. So let's break down each one of those terms and see how it actually works in practice. Okay, for this example, let's take a look at the map. What we have is our team is going to be the circles that say A and B. The A circle is going to be our TK character, our character that can use telekinesis. And our opponents are the X's and Y. The Y figure is the one that we want to be able to attack for these examples. And our B figure, we're going to say, has no move and attack type of abilities. So we have to use our TK to open up lines of fire or to put him in position to make the attacks. For this first example, we're going to look at the part of TK that's highlighted, which is the single base friendly character and how to move that character. For our examples today, we're going to use Saint Walker over there as our A figure. He has telekinesis in his attack power slot, and he has a 5 range. So for this example, we're going to see if he can TK the B figure and where he can TK him to. So the B figure is within 5, which is Saint Walker's range, so it meets that first criteria of choosing a single base friendly character within range and line of fire. So Saint Walker, it's within his range and line of fire. Okay, now we'd like to TK him up there to the square in front of Y so that the B figure can have take a shot on Y. So that meets the second criteria. The square we want to move him into is within range and line of fire of Saint Walker. Okay, and then the last piece that we need here is that square also has to be within 4 squares, which it is, of the character that we're choosing, but it's not within line of fire, so we can't move him there because the square that we want to move him into is not within line of fire of that terrain marker or character that we're trying to move. Now, this new square also meets the criteria for Saint Walker, and it's within 4, and the line of fire is there, so that should be a fine square. We can move B there, and then B can make the attack on figure Y. Now you'll notice there that B was adjacent to character X, which usually if B wanted to move, you'd need to do a breakaway for move types of actions, or even just to move in general. But telekinesis is a placement, so there's no breakaway. We're just taking B and placing him somewhere else. And now with this next setup, we're going to take a look at the part of telekinesis that's highlighted, which is the range terrain action piece of it. For this, same setup as to what characters are on what teams, but then you'll see the star with an O in it. That's going to be an object that we want to use. So let's break down this part. This character can make range terrain actions as if it was holding terrain markers within range and line of fire. So that's within the character's range and line of fire. So this character, Saint Walker, has a 5 range. Okay, so let's see what the range terrain action is. So this range terrain action is defined as range. If this character is holding a terrain marker, make a range attack targeting an opposing character within line of fire and a range equal to the terrain marker's range or bolt value. So that's a little thing that could trip you up. It's not within Saint Walker's range for range terrain actions. You can make that attack based on the range bolt value of the terrain or object that you are using. Now this particular object, we're going to say that it has no printed values on it, which means it falls into the default marker values, which defaults as bolt 4. So that means we can use this object for a 4 range terrain attack. Okay, so it meets the first criteria for this telekinesis piece, which means Saint Walker does have range to that object. But now it's as if Saint Walker was holding it now. So that means we can then use the object's printed values or the default values to determine what happens. So we're going to be able to throw this 4 squares, and if it had nothing printed on there, the damage would be a 2 damage with the range terrain action. Okay, now something to note here is you can do that for objects. You can do it for blocking terrain, elevated terrain, hindering terrain, but you cannot do it for debris markers. It says right in the description that it can't be picked up, held, destroyed, or used in close range terrain action. So debris markers, you can't do that with. Also note that debris markers are immobile. So in some of our next examples, debris markers can't be moved or placed because they're immobile. Okay. Also, you can't do this with smoke or water markers because they also say that they can't be used in close or range terrain actions. Also note that they can't be picked up, held, or destroyed. We'll cover that in a terrain video that we're doing in the next few days, so stay tuned for that video. All right, let's take a look at this example. So this one we have elevated terrain. The character setup is, as you can see on the screen, our B figure that has no move and attack. Doesn't have a way to get up that elevated and make a shot, so he could either just go up there and then wait to make a shot. But we do have our Saint Walker who has the TK. So normally the Y that we want to attack, he's pretty safe. He's behind elevated terrain, and 2 other characters are sitting there that are kind of making it tough to get down those transition squares. So he's normally would be pretty safe back there. But with our TK, what we can do is we can choose a terrain marker that is within Saint Walker's range and line of fire, which this meets the criteria for. And we can check to make sure that we can move it somewhere that is also 4 squares in line of fire from that terrain marker, which the square we want to move it to meets that criteria. And so we can go ahead and TK it there. Now that elevated terrain has been placed underneath where our B figure's at. So now our B figure's on elevated, which means he can see over top of the X figure to make the shot on Y. All right, let's take a look at this example. So again, usually a pretty safe setup. The X figures are in front of the Y, keeping that opponent protected. They're on elevated terrain in the middle of that elevation, so it makes it tough for somebody to get a line of fire. There's blocking terrain to the south and a wall. There's a wall to the north. So usually a pretty safe type of setup. But with TK and the new terrain, how we can move it around, it's not as safe as it used to be. So our Saint Walker has line of fire to that square of elevated. It meets the criteria. We can move it right there to where the blue arrow's pointing. So we're going to go ahead and TK it to that square. Okay, now what happens is, since those opponents were on elevated, the elevated's been moved out from underneath them. Now they take 1 damage from the fall. Now they might have reducers, but if not, they each take 1. That was the TK action. Now our B figure can go ahead and make his attack from that elevated square, shooting over top of X's to get to Y. And let's take a look at one other example here. For this example, we're going to say that the Y figure has stealth, and one of its teammates, one of the X's, has smoke cloud. So the X figure throws out the smoke cloud. Usually then your stealth character is pretty protected in there, especially if we don't have a way to get next to him and we don't have any improved targeting abilities, which for this example we'll say. So Y is sitting there with stealth in a smoke cloud hindering terrain marker. But with TK, here's something we can do. We can go ahead and draw a line of fire to that smoke cloud marker, and we can TK it over to this square. Our B figure's on elevated, which means now they can shoot over top of those hindering markers that are down there that would usually keep Y in stealth. And now Y square is clear. So B has a clear line of fire to Y to make his shot. All right, hopefully that gave you an idea of how to use telekinesis and some examples of how it interacts now with the terrain, which is a new type of thing that's going on. So I think the strategies will just expand. Even though some of the rule changes, they're going to be making the map smaller going forward, and some of the values of the figures might be different. But what it opens up is a lot of different types of strategy, which I think is always good. And I think it's pretty cool to see then what people come up with, how they're going to interact different figures, characters, powers and abilities with these new game concepts. So hopefully this helped you out with the basics here, and then you can expand on it, figure out how you're going to use it in your strategies. Let me know what you thought of the video in the comments below, and like and subscribe. Thanks for watching today. Check it out. If you dig what we do, go ahead and like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.